First, her father was arrested for horrific physical abuse, and now her mother is also facing charges for allegedly knowing about the abuse but doing nothing to stop it. We're going to be taking a closer look at this horrific case and the injuries that little Izabella Loving suffered in her short life with coroner Dr. Naida Rutherford. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Back in April, deputies with the Washoe County, Nevada Sheriff's Office made a horrible discovery. 5-year-old Izabella Loving was unresponsive at her home in Cold Springs, which is near Reno. They got the call at around 7 a.m. on April 3rd. They tried life-saving measures, but Izabella was pronounced dead. And first responders, they were quickly able to determine that this 5-year-old's body showed significant signs of abuse. Now, according to court documents that were reviewed by My News 4 in Nevada, dispatchers were told the girl had no pulse, was cold to the touch, had been sick the night before, and I'm going to warn you right now, some of the descriptions are really tough to think about. Because, for example, court documents reveal Izabella, this young girl, had more than 10 injuries to just her face. So you ask, who could do that? Who could do that to a child? First responders said they found Izabella in a bedroom in the upstairs of the home on a tiny mattress. There was no bed frame. They described her as having oral trauma along with apparent bruising on her face, pelvis, hips, the insides of her biceps, and on her genitals. She also had multiple cuts, scabs, scrapes on her arms, legs, torso, face, including a black eye and a gash over the other eye. Izabella's parents were identified as Nicholas and Andrea Loving. And according to the documents that were seen by My News 4, the couple, who had 4 children, had lots of excuses for Izabella's injuries. For example, both Nicholas and Andrea told police that the 5-year-old had been hit in the face with a baseball bat by accident, causing a black eye. Nicholas claimed she also fell out of his truck recently, and he had to quickly grab her, causing the bruising to her arm. But then he said she fell out of the truck a second time, causing the gash on her head when she hit the asphalt. He also apparently claimed that Izabella fell down the stairs, causing bruising on her butt. The parents claimed that they were planning to take Izabella to a specialist to figure out why she was falling so much. Well, on April 2nd, Izabella had reportedly been sick for more than a week, coughing up mucus and blood. And around 5 a.m. on April 3rd, one of the other children woke up the Lovings and told them that Izabella was throwing up again. So the couple claimed that they checked on her and that Izabella told them she was okay, so they went back to bed, and hours later, she would be declared dead. Both Nicholas and Andrea, they did interviews with county investigators, which I will tell you revealed even more disturbing details about the conditions that Izabella was living in. It reveals some of the allegations against Andrea and what happened after Izabella died. So, to discuss this in a lot more detail, to get insight into these specific injuries and what they tell us, or what they may tell us, I want to bring on an expert here. I want to bring on Dr. Naida Rutherford, coroner in Richland County, South Carolina. Thank you so much, doctor, for taking the time. Really appreciate you coming back here on Sidebar.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Nicholas and Andrea sound like they're lying based on these injuries.
Well, let's talk about it, because we've talked about this before, right? Coroners and medical examiners, they see some of the worst things a human being can possibly see on a daily basis. But to see those kinds of injuries on a child, generally speaking, how do you even conduct that examination? As a human being, I don't know how you do it. It seems like an impossible task.
Well, I'll tell you, you put your emotion to the side and you say, what can I do to possibly get justice for this child? So the examination of the body, just the external examination of the body, told them so much. The responders on scene, when they did the examination, all of the cuts, the bruising, the changes that happen to a body post-mortem, they can be significant in terms of color changes. So when you have a situation like this, where you're seeing all these different injuries on multiple planes of the body, you know that someone possibly did this to this child. And this is why the autopsy becomes so important. So you have to put your emotions to the side.
This is definitely a story we wanted to bring to you to shine a light on. It is so disturbing, but important to tell. And one of the reasons that we can do this, to really dive into a story like this, is because of the amazing support that we get from our sponsors like Upside. Now, let me tell you real quick, Upside is great. It is a free app that gets you cash back when you buy daily essentials. So if I pump my gas, I can use Upside. I go out to lunch, I can use Upside. Maybe I get something at a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why not get cash back when I do all these things, right? This is real, actual cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. So once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app, you get paid. So to find out how much you can earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code Sidebar because you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. According to the medical examiner's office, Izabella died due to bacterial pneumonia, but multiple blunt force injuries, malnutrition, dehydration, and medical neglect significantly contributed to her death. So Dr. Rutherford, I want to talk about each of these causes of death and contributions. First, bacterial pneumonia. What is that a result of? Can that be a result of physical abuse? Is there another cause? What is that?
Well, bacterial pneumonia is just an infection in the lungs. And so, if not treated, it can cause a fatality. It can cause the child to die. We see deaths from pneumonia all the time. It can kill you. But you look at the circumstances surrounding that bacterial pneumonia. So, somebody could look at this case and say, oh, she just died of natural causes, which I'm sure their defense will try to pull out someplace that this was a natural cause of death. But then, how do you explain with this bacterial pneumonia? Just taking that one diagnosis, most parents don't want their children to be sick. And so if your child is sick, you're going to seek medical care and attention. From the time the child is born, every time you go to the doctor's office, they're telling you, hey, if your child has fever or sickness or changes for more than 3 days, you should take them to be seen by a physician. Even if they're taking medications, even the manufacturer instructions on the back of a medicine bottle will tell you that if your symptoms persist more than 3 days, that you should go and seek medical care. There's a point in one of the news stories that I read about this case that they said that it had been 12 days that this child had been sick. Your child is vomiting multiple times, throwing up supposedly emesis that has mucus and blood in it. That is not okay. So you just ignored these symptoms. You didn't think this child needed to be seen. And that's where we get this determination for manner of death as homicide, because they neglected to seek medical attention for something that could be fatal.
What about malnutrition and dehydration? Because you can see how tiny Izabella is in some of the photos that were posted to Facebook. Lack of consistent food and water to a body, I mean, that's the parent's responsibility, I would imagine.
It is. Yeah, where's a 5-year-old going to nourish themselves and get something to eat or drink? The conditions that this poor little girl was found in is heartbreaking, because there's a point in one of the stories where the dad is telling them that he caged her. So she couldn't get out to even go to the bathroom, let alone try to get food and help for herself. So it seems like this was a case of severe neglect, malnutrition, dehydration, and abuse that you just can't even imagine, especially as a parent. I just can't imagine someone doing this to a child.
The multiple blunt force injuries. Is there a way, doctor, to determine what exactly caused those injuries? You heard me describe it a little bit before. It could be accidents that the child was involved in. Not surprising, young children fall, bump all the time. But multiple blunt force injuries. Is there a way to determine exactly what caused those?
So sometimes you can't tell exactly what may have caused an injury. For example, like a bruise. Yes, you could get that by bumping into the door jamb. Sure, you could get a bruise on your arm, but does the bruising location match the type of injury that is being described? So if she has bruising to her genitalia, that does not make sense. A child can fall and hurt themselves, but bruising to the genitalia, where did that come from? There's a point where the mother talked about watching her husband kick this child in her private area. I can't even imagine as a mom what that, like, not reacting to that. But maybe she was frightened. We don't know the ins and outs of what happened in that home. But what I can tell you is the multiple blunt force injuries to this child, while we may not be able to specifically state that, a finger pinching the inside of her bicep caused this bruising. They will look for pattern of injury, and I'll be really interested to see what the medical examiner came up with. Like, was there a shoe print? I had a case one time where the entire boot print with the logo was on someone's face, and so I could tell police, hey, this imprint matches the shoes seemingly that the guy was wearing who called 911. You guys should maybe look into that. So when you see things like that, sometimes things are very obvious, but sometimes they aren't.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's awful. And this is a collection of different factors that we're talking about here. And the fourth one that we didn't even get into is medical neglect. That seems kind of overarching. Is that just a way to say that she needed medical treatment and was denied it, never got it?
Well, what we really look at as from the coroner's perspective is to see, did this person act within reason for someone in the same circumstances? So if these are two adults who do not have cognitive disability, who understand, logic and reason, they understand that this child was sick at some point in a 2-week period, because 12 days is essentially 2 weeks. They did not even attempt to go and seek medical care for her. Throwing up blood is an ominous sign. So I would think that that would trigger a parent to want to get their child medical care. So when we see cases like this, or when a child has been diagnosed with something and the family refuses to follow up, this is how you could take something that seemingly seems like a natural death and rule it as a homicide. Because would a reasonable person who wasn't trying to hurt this child, who wasn't trying to neglect them, would they have taken this child to be seen by a medical professional? And the answer to that question is most adults don't want to see a child suffer. They're going to take them for care. These parents did not do that.
I want to go back to what Nicholas and Andrea Loving, as well as their other children, had to say to investigators after Izabella died. So according to those court documents and My News 4's reporting, Nicholas denied ever hitting, spanking, shoving, kicking this 5-year-old. He said he works a lot. He's hardly ever home, so he doesn't know how she got most of her injuries. And his story about discovering Izabella on April 3rd also seemed to change during the course of his interview, because at one point, he said that he'd been awakened around 7 a.m. to someone freaking out about Izabella being unresponsive. Later, he told investigators that actually he found her at 2 a.m. and didn't call for help for around 5 hours because he was consoling Andrea. Dr. Rutherford, time of death. That can be very critical to an investigation. Would the medical examiner have immediately known that Izabella had been unresponsive for a period of time, maybe a lot longer than what we're hearing from this account?
Absolutely. We look at something called rigor mortis, and we look to see if someone's muscles have stiffened to a point that makes sense for the timeline that is given to us. For example, as soon as a person dies, their body's muscles will begin to stiffen. It starts in the smallest parts of your body and then works its way out to the larger parts. So first responders, they would have known that Izabella had been deceased if they've had that type of training. If they haven't had that type of training, they may have thought, okay, she's cold to the touch. I don't see where she was transported to the hospital. I thought she was declared dead on scene, which is how they were able to examine where she was. But if that's the case, one of the things that becomes very important is how stiff were her muscles. So even just taking your arm and extending it outward, that's very easy for us to do. We're alive and well. But for someone who's been deceased more than 3 hours, their muscles are going to begin to stiffen. And once you get to the 6, 9, 12, 15-hour marks, that body is going to be extremely rigid. So that's going to be very important. By the time the medical examiner gets that body, it's going to be even more stiff. But then there's a period where the rigor mortis begins to soften. And so the medical examiner will be able to give some indicator as to a range for time of death. It is not an exact science. And so they will have to just give a range, but they will use things like lividity, the color changes that happen postmortem, or rigor mortis, which is the stiffening of the muscles that happen postmortem.
Now, the documents, they also discuss the conditions that Izabella was apparently living in, because Nicholas allegedly admitted to police that he kept, as you said, this 5-year-old in a makeshift 5-foot by 5-foot cubby in the room that she shared with her sister. And he said that she was locked in there sometimes as punishment. Deputies that were executing a search warrant also noted that the other girls had a nice queen bed to sleep on, while Izabella slept on a small crib mattress on the floor. The couple also apparently asserted that they'd previously been told not to take a child to the doctor until they'd been sick for at least 12 days. Dr. Rutherford, this is, I don't even know what to say about it. Is there any reason not to take your child to the hospital or a doctor if they're in distress? Don't you do it immediately?
You do. As a parent, when you notice that something is wrong with your child, if you're actually taking care of them, then yes, you're going to take that child to be seen. Once the doctor sees them, they may tell you, hey, this is going to go away. Let me prescribe these medications. If the symptoms worsen, then you need to come back in 3 or 4 days. Or sometimes they may say, oh, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, just to make sure that the child is progressing. But if anything changes, please bring your child back. They never went to have her evaluated so that they would know that. There is no physician alive, no nurse practitioner, no physician's assistant, no healthcare provider is going to tell you to wait 12 days for a child to be sick. Children decompensate so quickly. And with bacterial pneumonia, I'm sure that this poor, sweet little girl was having difficulty breathing. She would have been short of breath. She would have had issues with her lungs. And the fact that she was actually coughing up sputum that was stained with blood is crazy to me, that a mom or a dad wouldn't look at that and say, we should take her to be seen. Even the vomiting is super concerning because she was so malnourished. What was she throwing up? I would be very interested to see the toxicology report for this, to see if they were poisoning her or what they were actually giving her that she would have had the possibility to even throw up. It's very disheartening that that these are the facts of this case.
And when it came to Andrea's interview, My News 4 notes that she told detectives that she witnessed Nicholas kick Izabella in the genitals, drag her by the collar up the stairs. She also allegedly said, I should go to jail for not helping her and Nick should go to jail for killing her. But Andrea wouldn't be arrested for several more weeks, and we're going to get into why that is in just a moment. But investigators, they interviewed the Lovings' other children, and the timeline changed again because the kids said they were woken around midnight and forced to go downstairs where Nicholas told them that Izabella had died and they might be going on a road trip. And after detectives officially arrested and charged Nicholas with 1 count of child abuse causing substantial bodily injury, they re-interviewed him, revealing what they'd learned from the other interviews. And the court documents say he then blamed the decision not to call 911 right away on Andrea, saying that was her idea. So you see, everybody's pointing fingers. But Andrea told investigators that Nicholas wanted to bury the body in the backyard and run to his parents' house in Virginia. Andrea was allegedly concerned that if they left Isabella's body in the bedroom, quote, it would rot. That's according to My News 4. Dr. Rutherford, your reaction to this?
So the facts of this case are just disturbing. The fact that their stories are conflicting, that the timeline changes so much. Those forensic interviews with the children become very important because what did they see? What did they hear? And I'm sure they will conduct more forensic interviews with those children to get more details about what may have happened to little Izabella in that home. And did the other children have any signs or symptoms that they were also malnourished or that they were being beaten or abused in any way? These things will become very important as this case progresses. But the fact that the mother said that she should go to jail and that the dad should also go to jail, but him for murder and her for not being reactive to the situation just speaks volumes to me because those are their words. These are not things that the police are making up. These aren't things that are just being thrown out there as speculation. You have the mother and father who ironically have the last name Loving, who were not being very loving to this child. They did not have a loving home. What they did, seemingly based on the injuries to Isabella's body, is that they were being very abusive. And I'm sure that the arrest of the mom had something to do with probably an investigation into, could she have possibly been a victim of domestic violence? Was she afraid to leave? I'm sure all of these things will come up in defense, but I don't know how you allow your child to be this sick, to be this abused, and you do absolutely nothing. She didn't mention being in fear for her life. She didn't mention that she was afraid. It seemed like she was in on this plan to cover this up.
Well, a bail hearing was held about a week after Nicholas's arrest, but he didn't appear in court. Let his attorneys handle it for him. Real quick, regarding the bond hearing on Nicholas Loving that apparently happened. So the judge noted that she's required to give him a bond for the one child abuse charge that he faces. So she set it at $10 million cash. He's also not allowed to have any contact with his wife, Andrea, or any of his other children who are now in state custody. And guess what? Nicholas Loving had been convicted of child abuse previously. Yes, Andrea was dating him back in 2014 when he pleaded guilty to abusing her son from a previous relationship. According to court documents for that case, he broke the 2-year-old boy's arm and bit him so hard on the shoulder that he left bite marks. Andrea actually argued for leniency, and despite facing up to 8 years in prison, he was given 5 years of probation. Okay, so Dr. Rutherford, back to you. How often do we see repeat offenders when it comes to crimes like child abuse? And yes, he might be innocent until proven guilty with respect to the current case, but I can't ignore asking this question.
Well, I'll tell you this, abuse usually starts small. People don't normally attack in the biggest way. They start with little things like neglect, not feeding the child, treating the child differently from the other children that may be in the home. And certainly we see this in cases where the child is not the biological child of the person who's doing the abuse, but we also see this with biological parents. We've had a number of cases where the biological parent, for whatever reason, will target this one child and all of the other children are not targeted. And so this is very common. Abuse starts small. Maybe it's yelling, maybe it's screaming, maybe it's taking toys or just intentionally being mean. And then it advances because for whatever their reasons are, this child agitates them to the point of them causing abuse to that child. So this is not his first time doing this. He's already had a conviction for it. So while he may be innocent until proven guilty here, we know that he had a conviction prior to this. And so when we do child fatality reviews, which are a federal mandate and usually a state mandate to review the cases of children who are killed, we look at all of the factors. That Child Protective Services call that was made for the 2-year-old. We will look at the entire history for this family, and we will look for any law enforcement calls, any other signs of abuse, and they may even put those other children into protective custody to make sure that they don't have contact with the parents who are possibly the abusers. So there's a lot that goes into a child fatality.
Now, we haven't talked about Andrea Loving and what happened to her, right? So there was a lot of community outrage that she hadn't been arrested for her alleged role in Isabella's abuse. But that changed on July 28th when she was charged with 1 count of child abuse causing substantial bodily harm, the same charge that Nicholas faces. And Andrea's search history and text messages reveal even more shocking information because according to court documents that were reviewed by My News 4, Andrea indicated in text messages that she only fed Izabella 1 piece of bread a day. She also Googled various disturbing symptoms despite not seeking medical care for the girl. According to police, they included signs my child is dying, dark blood on boil when popping, how long can you go without food, kidneys failing, my 5-year-old is peeing blood. Andrea claimed to detectives that she never physically harmed Izabella, that was all Nick, she said. She claimed Nicholas beat her more times than she could count, but despite all the injuries Izabella had, all the time she'd fallen, all the really concerning symptoms, Andrea said this 5-year-old last saw a doctor in 2022. Andrea also allegedly told investigators that they kept Izabella out of school this past year because of the marks and bruises all over her body. And when she went out in public, Andrea would put makeup on this little girl and make her wear a face mask to cover up the marks. The parents also indicated that CPS, Child Protective Services, had recently wrapped up an investigation into the family, and it's unclear what, if anything, came from that investigation. However, Ashley Vinny, the aunt of Andrea's oldest son, has been quite outspoken about how many different people failed this little girl. Vinny told My News 4 that she and others reported Nicholas Loving for abuse, but that the CPS case was closed in March. She said in part, 2 weeks prior to the death, the kid was malnourished, bruises all over her face, and to just say that you're doing a great job and then leave the house and close it, I was told there was an in-home safety plan, but still, these kids should have been removed from the house. and she and others are calling for Nevada to enact Isabella's law, which would mandate more welfare and random checks in homes in previous child abuse cases. My News 4 reports that a detective wrote in official documents Andrea admitted she could have and should have sought help, but did not. Andrea said she thinks about that all the time and said she feels bad and guilty now. Her first court appearance was continued to August 5th, when bail is going to be set, and Nicholas remains behind bars as well. Dr. Rutherford, I want to get your final thoughts on what we just laid out.
Here's the thing that's most disturbing about this is that you have a mom and a dad who are responsible in some way for the death of this child. And everything will come out in the court documents, in the trial, but you have people who reported this. So did this system fail Izabella? Did this system fail the other children who are in the home who are witnessing this type of trauma and graphic abuse that's happening to their little sister? This is a case where so many hands are involved and so many people will have to answer as to why Izabella died.
Dr. Naida Rutherford, thank you so much for coming on. It was great seeing you, and I appreciate you breaking down all aspects of this very, very disturbing story.
My pleasure.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.